you're going to see Paul Finebaum of the Paul Finebaum Show. He's the voice of the SEC. What do you think? Over, under, new kickoff rule, 9.5 touchdowns this year.
I'm going to say under.
Okay. Now, can you see college football changing to this anytime soon, where they adopt the NFL's new kickoff rule?
I don't know why not, Dan, considering everything else in college football represents and resembles the NFL right now. So if it makes them a few more dollars, I'd say they go for it.
But they don't change their rules that often, though.
No. They're a tough group because they have a bunch of former coaches on these committees. But I think they'll sit back and talk about it, consult the lawyers, maybe try to settle a case, and ultimately react. They're not a quick acting group.
Yeah, but I don't know. We don't hear about player safety in college. We hear about player safety in the NFL. Why is that?
Because you haven't seen as much activity from a legal standpoint like we went through years ago with the concussions. And I mean, I hear it occasionally. I hear it emphasized how much we care. And quite frankly, Dan, I don't hear anything else about it.
Yeah, I wondered about that. I thought that there was a groundswell years ago for some kind of litigation, but it feels like everything, there's a groundswell, some kind of litigation, then it kind of dissipates when it comes to college football. The regular season now, in particular with the Big Ten and the SEC, the importance of the Big Ten schedule during the regular season is going to be what?
It's critical. If you don't have Ohio State on your schedule, if you don't have a road game, let's say at Oregon, you're going to benefit. And we're so used to the traditional swan at the end of the season by Penn State losing in successive weeks to Michigan and Ohio State, and that doesn't happen right now. It's a convoluted schedule, primarily because you now have 4 West Coast schools, and everybody tried to come up with a fair and equitable plan, but it doesn't work out that way.
And I'm also wondering about this, where Notre Dame can't be seeded higher than 5th, correct? Even if they're the number 1 team in the country, if the playoffs start, they're 5th, correct?
That is correct, and that's just Notre Dame making sure they have a spot, but not having to do the dirty work. I mean, you have to love Notre Dame. They
have to play their way out of the playoffs, Paul.
I don't know how they can this year, frankly, because I mean they have a couple. I mean, last year they went, I believe, to Ohio State. I mean, that's a dangerous game. They replaced that this year. They always play them, but they're at USC. Hardly the same impact.
And then you're looking at, so SEC and Big Ten, are they guaranteed any spot there? Like the winner of the Big Ten and the winner of the SEC, what's the lowest that they can be seated?
Yeah, I mean, they won't be very low. I mean, they'll be grandfathered in. So, you said guaranteed. I have this funny feeling that that if the number goes below 3, the CFP will kind of go poof like at the beginning of Mission Impossible, because we all know, not to state retreaded information here, that the SEC and the Big Ten now have this alliance where they essentially run the sport. It's been reported that the Big Ten tried to guarantee in the new agreement that they would either the SEC or the Big Ten would be number 1 regardless of record. Fortunately, that did not go through.
Your favorite pinata, Lincoln Riley.
Well, yes.
Why? Why Lincoln Riley? It just seems that draws your ire.
Oh, Dan, you have to remember, college football takes a hiatus for a number of months, and then we parachute back in July, and I'm suddenly appearing with Stephen A. and Greeny and the Dan Patrick Show. So I've got to come up with new material. I work through it, and then when I go on tour in the fall, I use whatever works the best. I answered this. I frankly did say a lot of things about Lincoln Riley recently, and I meant them. I don't think he's a great elite coach. And I know that the pushback is, well, look at what he did at Oklahoma. I know what he did there. He inherited a masterpiece from Bob Stoops. And yes, he was able to maneuver and finesse Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray into Heisman trophies, and he nearly got one for Jalen Hurts, and he did get one for Caleb Williams, but it's really what he hasn't done that I think is so noteworthy. And he hasn't won a championship, and he really hasn't even come close because Lincoln Riley has just forgotten one of those tenets of defense, that special teams, offense, and can we all say in unison, defense. He's never been on speaking terms with the word defense in his career.
But, okay, he has to know that this is a problem, all right?
You would think.
But you think Deion could come into USC and make more sense than Lincoln Riley? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
I heard what you said about that. I got a chance to listen to you opine, and everything you said, Dan, made perfect sense, except that I wasn't like saying I've done 6 months of research. I'm presenting my case as a Solicitor General to the Supreme Court. I mean, I just threw it out on first take, and the next thing you know,
you can't just throw it out, Paul. You know better than that.
Well, I was trying to get a new deal with ESPN. I figured that would help.
Well, congratulations, you accomplished that. I don't know if Deion can coach. I don't know if he can recruit. I don't.
Boy. Dan, you're about to get attacked by the Deion police.
Look, I would say it to him. He won 4 games last year. The over-under this year is 5.5. I said if you didn't get Deion last year, you're not going to get him this year. I might have to amend that. So I'm thinking Deion is going to be better this year. And if he isn't, he loses Travis Hunter. He loses his son. I mean, come on.
You're right. Okay, I agree with you. Except Deion's not really a coach. He's a producer,
a CEO.
He's like they bring Spielberg into the movie. He fixes it up. He gets a lot of special effect. That's what he does. And my argument a couple weeks ago was that you bring him into LA. The town is on fire. Just like it was for about a minute under Lincoln Riley. He had everything going for him, and then suddenly he didn't. And my argument about LA is it's a town of winners. They don't like the losers out there. And suddenly Lincoln Riley looks like a loser. And I think it's going to continue that way. So no, Deion is not Bill Belichick and Nick Saban wrapped into one. But he is a dynamic figure. He gets ratings. He brings excitement, and that brings players.
Coach, with more pressure, are we going to look at Sharon Moore, or are we going to look at Kalen DeBoer at Alabama?
I think it's Kalen DeBoer because Sharon Moore was he had a hand in that national championship last year, taking over a couple of games for Jim Harbaugh. And do I miss Jim Harbaugh already? But DeBoer, if he doesn't go to the playoffs, this season is a failure, and I'm not being harsh. That's just the standard at Alabama. And the worst thing for him is that the fans, they may have seen Nick Saban leave, but their attitude remains the same. And they'll give him a pass this year. You don't have to win the title, but you better get somewhere close to it. And Saban's, did Saban spoil them? Of course he did. Even with not vintage Saban teams, he was able to knock off Georgia last year and stop that run.
What do you think happens with this investigation, the report about a potential report about Michigan and the cheating scandal?
I would be shocked if Michigan loses postseason. That's just not the way the NCAA operates any longer. And considering that they started investigating Tennessee a few months ago, and the next thing you know, it was in court, and then they were getting swatted down, and all of a sudden it's seemingly gone away. I don't think they have the fortitude to go after someone like Michigan. I think they hate Michigan with a passion, but I don't think they'll be able to do that.
Who's the UT in the SEC? Tennessee has been grandfather. I know this is big to Texas. This is important, but I have to ask the question. You're the voice of the SEC.
Yeah, I had an expert the other day. He actually investigated it, and without Tennessee and Davy Crockett, there would be no Texas right now. So even though I'm prejudiced, having been a graduate of the University of Tennessee, it's no contender. It's UT Knoxville. That's where the action is.
How's your relationship with Lane Kiffin?
Depends. He's a very moody guy, in case you haven't noticed.
Okay, how serious was he when you guys were live and it felt like there was a little tension between you two?
Dan, I hate to burst a great feud, but That happened on a Monday at 5:45, and suddenly on Thursday it got reported in the media that it had been the moment of media days. Um, we text, we're friends. He just can't seem to get over something that 11 years ago on College Game Day, he claims I got him fired, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, by the way. But he's like that that high school girlfriend or boyfriend that's still carrying that torch, and he's going to show up at the wedding no matter how many times you get married to try to destroy you.
Do you really think that Pat Hayden was watching College Game Day and all of a sudden came to the realization, as you said, that Lane Kiffin was the Miley Cyrus of college coaches, and he went, "Oh my God, we've made a mistake"?
No, here's the story. I mean, this is given to me by Lane Kiffin. I mean, he is my source for this story. He tells me that while I'm on there, by the way, it's my first tryout at college football. They put me on game day because SEC Network had not started. And I'm just rambling about Kiffin, what a bad coach he is. And in Arizona that morning, Pat was watching the show, having breakfast with the president of USC, who, we all know presidents know nothing about sports. And all of a sudden, this president sees what somebody looks like an authoritative figure dressed in a Zeno suit. And he said, he's the Miley Cyrus of college football. And if he doesn't win tonight, he ought to be fired. And this is what Lane told me. He said, the president looked at Pat Hayden and said, if we lose tonight, fire his ass. That's Lane Kiffin's story. And now he's attacking me.
Wow. Doesn't Lane Kiffin aspire to be the Miley Cyrus of college coaches?
Well, you have to remember when I said that Miley's career was dead.
Oh, okay.
And that was part of his argument about me not knowing anything. He said, and now Miley Cyrus owns just won a Grammy, has a #1 hit. I mean, you can't win arguing with Lane Kiffin because he argues with you as a 17-year-old.
What was it like, though, to look at Nick Saban as a coworker instead of the coach at Alabama?
Yeah, you've done this with big-time former coaches. It was the most intimidating. We did a live 30-minute show on ESPN2, and it was by far an hour show, I should say, the most intimidating 60 minutes I've ever spent. Because every time Laura Rutledge would say, well, Paul, what do you think about Alabama? And I'm looking, there's the guy who left that program. I finally adjusted after my first just non sequitur. I said, great question, Laura. Let's hear a coach answer that. So he just answered every one of my questions.
Always good to talk to you. Congrats on the new contract there.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. My pleasure. Great to be with you guys.
Keep stirring it up. Paul Finebaum, host of the Paul Finebaum Show, the voice of the SEC.